You've seen his movies, Don't Look Up, Vice, The Big Short, and comedies like Step Brothers and Anchorman. In addition to making some of the most important and funniest films of our time, he has led civil action with Represent Us and has been an outspoken climate advocate. So Adam, it's a real pleasure to welcome you today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for showing up. Yeah, so I obviously we made Don't Look Up, and a lot of the impetus for it, it was made before COVID, was the feeling that I had and a lot of the people in my community had about being gaslit and treated like we were freaking out, or we were the end is near characters from the old New Yorker cartoons. And it was crazy because as I was writing the script, more and more science kept coming out. And there were several stake posts while I was working on the script, and even before, you know, the UN, the IPCC report that put a hard timeline on action and said that we had to act. Otherwise, if it went beyond this point, it would be beyond human control. And as you guys all know, that clock is, I think it's at 7 years, 100 or 92 days or something. I don't have it exactly in front of me. But, you know, we used to have a debt clock in Manhattan when I worked at Saturday Night Live, and you would drive by it every day and you would see it going up and then it slowed down. And given the stakes of what we're looking at, we need a clock probably 10 million times the size of that clock to be over the world. So it was an experience like I've never had in my life, making Don't Look Up and entering the climate movement, which I'm sure a lot of you have been in it a lot longer than I've been in it. I'm sure a lot of you have been aware of it longer than I have. But all I can tell you is when that moment where the science and the reality and the lack of awareness from our media, our leaders, our culture, when it hit me like a bolt. I couldn't sleep for 2-3 nights. My wife was worried. To this day, I still have issues with it. So what you're all trying to do, what's crazy about it is the most humble ask, given the science, which is empirical, and we all know 100% by climate scientists, and I think it's up to 98% for all peer-reviewed science, to declare a climate emergency. This is something that should have happened 20 years ago. To continue drilling is beyond suicidal, beyond insanity. And yeah, there's been a little inch of good stuff out of the current administration recently, but we all know, based on you know, I'm a director, I direct actors, I can tell body language, emotional tone, and you can tell the leadership of the US, and for the most part around the world, do not understand the severity of what we're facing, which is, to put it in naked terms, the collapse of the livable environment, the livable climate. And so I'm at a point now where I'm all in, and everything I'm doing, I'm here right now writing a show for HBO called Uninhabitable Earth, based on David Wallace Wells's book. It's a Black Mirror style anthology show. I'm also writing a feature film that's about kind of comedic look at the just deep systemic corruption and how much money has taken over our representative democracies, and which is the reason we're not seeing action on climate. And our company, Hyper Object Industries, obviously is named after Timothy Morton, the eco-philosopher's concept of hyperobjects, of which one of them is the climate crisis, that being forces that are so hyper relative, to use the term of relativity, that we can't even encounter them as individuals, let alone as societies. So I'm here today just to blow every bit of wind I have in the direction of your sails, to let you know that I'm here in any way you need me, and to thank you, and to remind you, because I have days where I forget, that what we're doing is really on a clock that's just over 7 years. And unlike a lot of the great challenges in human history, if you look at World War II and the rise of fascism and the Nazis, the press was with America. The press was with the UK and France. The leaders were with it. But in this case, so much dirty money has filtered into the system that I know a lot of you probably feel like walking around day in, day out. You probably have a lot of people, if you're anything like me, I get a lot of people rolling their eyes at me, a lot of people telling me to relax. And I don't know what to say to them. I hit them with a couple of quick scientific facts, but you can tell, there's nothing like a consensus culture. It's very, very powerful. And I'm here as a guy who makes movies and TV, for whatever that's worth. I'm here to tell you is mostly is just another human being. What you're doing is right, it's important, and it is the greatest challenge in the history of human life. And you could argue in the history of life in 66 million years since the Chicxulub meteorite hit the Gulf of Mexico. That's about as extreme language as you can use. And I think quite simply, we have to say to the society around us, this does not continue. And that involves, that may involve laying our bodies in front of fences. It may involve putting our careers in jeopardy. It may involve, the great theater director from South America called it the cop in the head theory. And that mentally, we all know that if you really cross the line of society, you're going to get a rifle butt to the head. But we're at that point, and I'm at that point where I'm willing to lay my flesh and blood down for this. So I'm incredibly moved by all of you showing up, and solidarity.
Thank you, Adam. It's really wonderful to hear you speak. And just a reminder to folks who have just tuned in, introduce yourself, just put your name, city, and state in the chat. So thank you. Okay, and now it's my pleasure to welcome Roger Hallam. So Roger Hallam is a British environmental activist. He was previously an organic farmer in South Wales, and attributes the destruction of his farm to a series of extreme weather events. Roger is a co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, the international movement that uses nonviolent civil disobedience in an attempt to halt mass extinction and minimize the risk of societal collapse. He is also co-founder of the Cooperative Federation organization, Radical Roots, and the political party, Burning Pink. He is author of Common Sense for the 21st Century, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse, which was self-published in 2019. Welcome, Roger. It's so great that you could join us.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Adam, for coming along. It really means a lot to me and everyone else. So thank you so much, Adam. And yeah, it's great to see all of you on the call. I've been on a whole bunch of calls over the last 2 years with US people, and it's always a great honor to be able to speak to you. So thank you. I do a whole bunch of talks, and one of the horrifying things about the whole climate situation is every week, I mean, literally every week, I could pick something that's like era busting to share with you, you know? And so I'm just gonna share something with you. Hopefully this is gonna work. This came through on my inbox, right? 2 days ago, right? This is a leading British scientist who had a private conversation with one of the leading authors of the IPCC report. And hopefully you're going to be able to hear this, who knows, but this is about a minute what he says.
Don't hear anything yet.
Roger, I think you're actually playing The Boys Are Back in Town by BTO, which, don't get me wrong, is a great song. We can't hear it.
That was me being a little bit overambitious. Yeah. So I'm going to summarize. I'm going to summarize what this guy said. Okay. So I actually know this guy. He's one of the leading scientists, called James Dyke. And what he said was he was having a conversation with one of the lead authors of the IPCC report. Does everyone know the IPCC report, right? This is the #1 top report in the world's top scientists. Basically, like us, they go for a pint, you know, at the end of the day. He has a chat with this guy and he says, so where do you think we're going to be, you know, by 2100? And James Dyke is expecting a political answer, you know, well, maybe this, maybe that. And the guy comes out straight and he says, we're heading over 3 degrees centigrade. And then James Dyke says, yeah, but, you know, we can't get to there because that means the end of the coral reefs, that means the end of the Amazon, you know, that means that all the people on the front line, you know, there's so many people are going to suffer on the front line of the climate crisis. You know, we can't, that's not going to happen, is it? And he says, the IPCC scientist turned to him with a sad smile and he just said, they're going to die. That's what he said. Okay. They're going to die. Billions of people are going to die at 3 degrees. This is our generation's, you know, rumor coming down the line about the concentration camps, right? This is our generation's, you know, the truth about slavery. This is the moment when our generation wakes up to the most excruciatingly outrageous injustice that is conceivable. That we're allowing the corporate class, we're allowing the governments, our governments, knowingly, willingly, in full knowledge of the science, to engage in the mass slaughter of billions of people. That's what 3 degrees is. There's no doubt about that, right? I've had dozens of conversations with the world's leading scientists. Go and check out Future of the Human Niche. At 2 degrees, 1 billion people on the road. At 3 degrees, 2 billion people on the road. This is what we're here to talk about tonight. I want to quote from you from the 3 leading scientists in the world. James Hansen. James Hansen is your country's leading scientist, is he not? What did he say after COP? He said, The idea that we're going to stay under 1.5 degrees centigrade is unadulterated bullshit. Unadulterated bullshit. That's what your leading scientists said about 1.5. What did Europe's leading scientist say about 2 degrees? Johan Rostrom, the director of the Potsdam Institute, the leading science institute in Europe, he said last year, if we hit 2 degrees, we're heading to 3. Do you get that? At 2 degrees, we're going to 3. We're sliding off the cliff. What did the leading scientist in the UK say last year? Sir David King, the former chief scientific advisor to the British government. You don't get more official than that, let me tell you, okay? What did Sir David King say? He said, we have to act quickly. What we do, I believe, in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. What we do in the next 3 to 4 years, what you do on this call, what Americans do, what people in Britain do, will determine the future of humanity. That's an Oxbridge euphemism, okay? Take it from me. That's a euphemism for mass death, forever, okay? I know this guy, right? He won't use the billion word because he's an Oxbridge guy. That's what it means in street language. Don't delude yourself. This is mass death, instituted knowingly by people who are getting away with it year in, year out, because we're sitting on our asses and not stopping them. It's as straightforward as that. The key reason why we're sitting on our asses is because we're not connecting the facts with our sense of responsibility. This is all about responsibility, folks. It's not about facts, it's about who we are. Who are we to allow this to happen? Seriously. What does it mean to honor our mothers and fathers? What does it mean to honor those that came before us? What does it mean to honor those millions of people in previous generations who laid down their lives for social progress, for social justice, for peace and prosperity? Are we going to sit by and allow this to happen on our shift? What's our responsibility? I have a good friend, she's 70 years old, she spent her lifetime in activism. And she says, I'm going to do whatever it takes because I will not allow 200 years of progress to be snuffed out in the next half decade. Over my dead body, she said, because she's got values. She knows who she is. And no way is she going to stand by. And what about our responsibilities to our children? Seriously, why are most people around the world stepping up? Not because of the facts, because in 10 years, they're going to have to face their children and say, what did I do? What did I do in 2022 when I knew we're heading for 3 degrees? That's why they're stepping up, because they have a sense of responsibility to their children, to other people's children, to the next 1,000 generations, for God's sake. There's a theologian I know, one of the leading theologians in Britain. She said, Roger, ask people this question: to what do we owe our deepest loyalty? That's what I have to ask you tonight. To what do you owe your deepest loyalty? Think about that question. Think about it after this call. Think about it tomorrow. Write that down. What do you owe your deepest loyalty? To your career? To your status? No. You owe your deepest loyalty to your self-respect, to your sense of doing the good. You do not want in 10 years to be looking in the mirror going, what the fuck did I do? That's the situation in 2022. People ask me all the time, they say, Roger, what can we do? What should we do? That's the most ridiculous question. We know precisely what to do. Everyone knows what to do. When you face evil, when you face injustice, what do? We know. You go to the capital city and you stay there and you protest day after day. What have people been doing for hundreds of years? That's what they do. We all know what to do. What we're on this call to do is to organize going to Washington. We don't have time for local campaigns. We don't have time for going through the motions. We don't have time for emailing, for writing letters to your senators. Those days are gone. In an emergency, when you're dealing with evil, you go to the capital city and you make change. It's happened 100 times before. That's what this call is about. That's why I'm here, to support declare emergency. In an emergency, this is what people do. I'm a specialist in political change. I did 5 years of research at King's College on it. I co-founded Extinction Rebellion. I set up Insulate Britain, right? I co-founded Just Stop Oil. They're all based on the same idea. You have to step up and cause non-violent disruption. Most of the people who have done this on this call started off with 3 people in the room. Last January in Britain, 3 of us got together. We decided to blockade the motorways around London to demand insulation. 6 months later, 100 people did it. We had a name recognition going from 0 to 80% in 2 weeks. We changed the conversation. 100 people can change history. How many people are on this call? 112 people. Do not delude yourselves. Please do not delude yourselves. You do not have the power to change American history. Remember the Freedom Riders, 430 people in prison, changed American history. That's what I'm here to say. I'm part of a network, A22. There's 10 projects around the world. Many of them have started off in the last 6 months, right, with a few people. As a specialist in political change, I'm saying once 30 people engage in continual direct action, the whole thing can take off. There's 20 people committed to this. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that means 10 more people from this call need to commit to stepping up with declare emergency to go into the motorways around Washington, DC and get the job done. Make that publicity. I have celebrities, I've got people that Adam knows, I've got people who've got money. They're all wanting to provide support. But the support is not going to come until you guys step up. Don't worry how much it's going to cost to get to Washington. Someone will get you there, right? This is a practical call. It's not academic. This is what we're here to ask you. This is what I'm here to do. There's nothing academic about billions of people dying. I'm all in. Adam's all in. Are you all in? That's my question. Thank you so much for having me.
Can I just add to what Roger said? If you want to block streets in Washington, DC, I'll pay to rent the trucks. We will get the money to block streets. We will have lawyers to get you out of jail. We are here 100% to back you, support you. But you know, Roger, that just got me stirred up enough that I unmuted. Whatever you need, we will give everything we have for you to put yourself on the line for this? I just wanted to kind of give an amen to Roger.
Yes, thank you, Roger. That was super powerful. So now we are going to hear from a couple of people from our sister groups in the Global A22 network that Declare Emergency is a part of. So first, it's my pleasure to welcome Ivana Sykes from Save Old Growth in Canada. So Ivana is a college professor in Vancouver, teaching English and gender and sexuality studies for the past 12 years. She received her PhD from Brandon University in the area of 19th and early 20th century writers and the use of photography and front pieces to create an image of the American author. In other words, nationalism studies. Before that, she worked for the Croatian Helsinki Committee for Human Rights at the tail end of the war in Yugoslavia, investigating war crimes and working with refugees from Bosnia. So Ivana, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. I feel a little bit intimidated coming after Roger's talk. I mean, that was just amazing. I do give lectures for a living, but there's nothing quite like Roger's message. But I will give you a little insight into someone from academia who has been, I've been involved in activism, but usually through NGOs and as you described it, the letter writing, the campaigning, and so, not really being on the front lines. And what happened to me was, I've been teaching about climate change and recycling and doing all the things that we were told to do 30 years ago. And not seeing any changes, obviously, seeing things getting drastically worse. And then last year I visited this area on Vancouver Island here called Fairy Creek, where there were mass protests being done to stop old growth logging. And it was a particular American company, actually, that had the rights to completely clear cut old growth in this one area of the island. And there were over 1,000 protesters arrested over several months. So I was there for a while. And one of those kind of cognitive dissonant moments was listening to the radio, listening to our premier of our province, British Columbia, John Horgan, announcing that they were stopping old growth logging while that they had stopped old growth logging while watching the trees falling and hearing the chainsaws. And it was just this cognitive dissonance where I was like, okay, this has to stop. We have to do something, because all the petitions had gone in, all of the marches had gone in, had occurred. And the messaging going out to people was that, okay, it's worked, when in fact it hadn't. And in fact, there was extreme police brutality on those sites. And I can actually send a link for that. The reason is because it was hidden in the forest, right? We were in the forest protecting the trees. And so it could be easily brushed aside that these were just, as we were called, dirty, crazy hippies, tree huggers and all of those things. And so it wasn't in the public view. It was on the news occasionally, but it didn't really disrupt anyone's life other than the protesters. And so essentially I decided, a group here decided to start actions in the city. And to start disrupting people's lives, along with disrupting the motorways, which was a way of also disrupting industry and production. And essentially, it's to see that we need to step up. We that are watching these, if you just open your eyes, if you go to a site, if you talk to the people that are living in these areas, you can get a lot of wrong information, at least here from the British Columbian government, which says that there's 30% of old growth left in our province, which is a complete lie because they're counting shrubbery. But in any case, so it very, very slowly, like I said, I wasn't really understanding the concept of how this would work. So it took me a while to kind of understand how stepping onto the road and blocking traffic would instigate change. But now that we've been through our first 2 iterations, and tomorrow is the start of our final iteration, so hence the lack of sleep, and but you know, we're getting ready for the final phase. And I'll just kind of walk you through how it started. Our first phase, we sat on the road for 2 days a week. And we would go out there. It would be a small group of us. And essentially the police would come, take us off, and end of story. And after that first month of those kind of action phases, we got a little bit of name recognition, and the newspapers started talking about our event and our organization. But now we basically moved it up. After the mobilization period, we went into the second iteration. And what happened there was we had 3 events per week. We went out, we blocked the roads, and within the first week of that 3-day kind of action phase, the first day, they just said there were protesters on the road. That's it. Second day, they said there are protesters about old growth logging. The third day, they actually named us, Save Old Growth, and suddenly we were being talked about in the news, social media, and in fact in Parliament as well. So in other words, you don't really see things happening until really you start the action. So now that I've seen it happening, I'm well aware that yes, this tactic does work. You know, and a couple of other things that I think about is really, you know, when was it, 2 years ago that the roof of Notre Dame Cathedral was on fire? Was that 2-3 years ago, something like that? And I remember, you know, the coverage of that and people saying, oh my goodness, what a horrible thing to happen. And yet we're able to see a 1,000-year-old tree just barrel down for roof shingles. Teal Jones, the company that has the right to basically clear cut old growth on Vancouver Island, claims that they're using the old growth for musical instruments. In fact, about 90% of what they cut down is used for mulch, which is just horrifying that these entire ecosystems are being decimated for the sake of, regardless what it is. But, you know, just the fact that they do try to justify their actions by saying, no, it's musical instruments. It's like, this is just the story that they tell us. And we need to kind of get through all of that noise. One such example, and what Roger was saying as well about personal responsibility, the reason why, like I said, we moved from the forest into the streets is because ordinary citizens don't like to be interrupted in terms of their daily life. Nobody does, right? Everyone's busy, you know, everyone's life is, you know, getting to your job is very important, et cetera, et cetera. However, we just had an action last week where we interrupted a football game. So we had 2 runners go up and attach themselves to the goalpost, like those that were for Insulate Britain and Just Stop Oil did. Massive coverage, but one of the main criticisms from ordinary people was, I just wanted to go to a game and forget about problems, right? And that is in general this idea of, how dare you interrupt my life when all I want to do is forget about what you're trying to make me focus. And at that point I said, all right, all of us said, now we have to go bigger and harder. We need to do this every day now. Because once people start getting disturbed by whatever if they're not disturbed by what science has proven, if they're not disturbed by what we know already, then we have to disturb them to wake up, or at least to complain to the government to do something about it. Because I guess, like, as we all said, petitions don't work, nothing works. So even if they hate you, which they do hate us here in Vancouver, but that doesn't matter, right? If they hate us, fine, but at least it disrupts life enough so that something has to be done about it. And for the most part, eventually we do have 82% of British Columbians agree to stop old growth logging, 91% of those in college years, so 21, 22 and under. And so essentially we know that people support it, but they just don't know what to do about it to make the government act. And so right now we're going to our third iteration and we're getting a lot of people asking to join, and they are. So I think really what people are looking for something to join. I know I didn't know what to do after I got out of Fairy Creek. I had no idea what to do. And again, I knew that the petitions wouldn't work. So, and I'm tired of, teaching classes about it and not getting anything done. So, that's the reason why I got involved. And, it is absolutely one of the most transformative and empowering things to do. I do not regret it at all. In fact, like I said, we're going bigger and stronger for the third iteration. And, we have people ranging from, we even had a 12-year-old want to get arrested, which, by the way, their parents were not in approval for this. So that was not approved. But, we have from very young teenagers to right now we have an 85-year-old grandfather. So
I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
We have to move to the next person though, but thank you.
No worries.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for having me.
And just a reminder to everybody to register for our follow-up call this Wednesday, if you have not done so already. We are now going to post the link in WeChat. Okay, thank you. It's now my pleasure to welcome Jane from Just Stop Oil. So Jane is 56, lives in Rockdale in the north of England, and works in the public sector. Arrested for the first time in her life in April this year with our sister group, Just Stop Oil. So thank you for joining us, Jane.
Thank you. A couple of my friends recently said to me, "Oh, you are brave." Well, I want to tell you I am not brave. I am terrified. I am terrified about what's coming. I am angry. I feel guilty because I and my lifestyle have contributed to some extent to what is now happening. But most of all, I am morally outraged that we have got to this stage, because people have known about this, governments have known about this, oil companies have known about this for decades. I am morally outraged that my government is hell-bent on signing up to 40, more than 40 new oil and gas licenses in full knowledge that millions are dying now and billions will die as a result of what they're doing. They're doing it in full knowledge, and that is genocide. It is a strong word. But what else do you call it when somebody knowingly does something that's going to result in all those deaths? So that's what's driving me. I'm not brave. So I was a member of Extinction Rebellion and I did a few local actions, nothing too naughty, and I didn't get into any trouble. And then Insulate Britain hit the headlines and I saw the commitment of those people and that non-violence, and I thought, this could work. If enough people do this, this could actually get the change that we need. It's focused, it's disciplined, it's non-violent, it's what I need to be doing. And I felt that very strongly. And so I spoke to my friends and family about sorting out my caring arrangements, and I decided to go and speak to the big boss at the top of my organization. And that was scary. And I went to see him and I said, I intend to engage in civil disobedience. I will be arrested. I will probably end up with multiple criminal convictions. And according to our code of conduct, that will land me out of a job. And he said, well, the code of conduct is up for renewal. I'll bear in mind what you've said and talk to the board. You see, these people know what's going on. And all these things are fighting into not taking action. You know, the code of conduct, I'm going to lose my job if I do that. It's rubbish. He knows what's going on. He doesn't want to look bad by sacking me for doing climate action. So that went okay. I went to a Just Stop Oil meeting. I signed up for Just Stop Oil. I did the non-violence training and met some amazing people. Went to a few other meetings and we formed a community, more amazing people. And then I was in my team and we went to an oil terminal in the Midlands in Britain. And in the middle of the night on the 1st of April, I went to try and disrupt the oil infrastructure and put my body in the way of the machine. And I was arrested and I spent 14 hours in a police cell. And then when I came out, I was released and given an injunction. I'm told that if I went anywhere near that oil terminal again, I faced up to 2 years in prison and unlimited fines. Again, it's the fear tactic. It's how dare you be disobedient? How dare you stick your head above the parapet? So I went back to the house, met up with my team. We supported one another. We talked it all through. I had a good cry because I keep telling you I'm not brave. You don't need to be brave to do this. You just need to have a conscience. And the next day we went and did it again. And then I went back to work and I told the big boss what I'd done. And this is probably where I start crying. He said he was proud to know me. And I was really touched by that. But then thinking about it afterwards, I thought, well, that's ego, isn't it? I'm feeling good because an important person feels proud to know me, but has no use to me. I don't want people to be proud to know me. I want them to join me. This is a numbers game. We all need to do this and we need to do it now. I have a step grandchild. She's 3 years old and she is delightful. She's into creepy crawlies and worms at the moment, and I watch her. I see her exploring her world, the wonder and the joy, and my heart breaks because I know what's coming. So what I want is in 10 years' time, I want her to say that she's proud to know me because she knows I did absolutely everything I could to give her a livable future. And to that end, I have to tell you that I have a good job. It's secure, it's well paid, it has a great pension. And I've been doing it for 13 years. And last week I decided to give that job up and I'm handing in my notice tomorrow. And that's because I need to devote all my time and my energies and my skills to just stop oil because it is our last and best chance in my country. And I hope that other countries around the world are doing the same. I know they are. We're out of time. That's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you for speaking and thank you for your bravery. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our last guest today, Kevin Kramer, co-founder of the Palm Collective and host of the Why Live series on the @the_Palm Collective social media platforms. The Palm Collective is a Black-led organization that was founded on the front line of the protests prompted by the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. It seeks to build a coalition of grassroots organizations in the DMV and beyond. In January 2021, Kevin quit his career to concentrate solely on activism. He's now fully self-supported through the GoFundMe page. We've included a link in the chat where you can help him out. So please chip in if you can. So thank you for joining us, Kevin.
First and foremost, thank you guys for having me. I hope you guys can hear me. I am currently at Darney Park. I'm with a family who are victims of police brutality. Xavier Hill, he was murdered by the police on January 9th, 2021, and today is his 20th birthday. So I reside on Piscataway land in Washington, D.C., and I came all the way down to Darney Park to be with them and just stand in solidarity and love. So first and foremost, I want to say that today I'll be covering, can everyone hear me? I hope everyone can hear me. Today I'll be talking about radical love. I'll be talking about how the climate crisis needs to be centered in racial and economic justice because they both go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive. I take all pronouns. And at the end of the day, I want first and foremost, I'm from Wilmington, Delaware. The graduation rate for boys of color is 13%. The minimum wage is $9.25. That was increased 2 years ago. It was $7.25. I live in a predominantly all Black community. My house is 5 blocks away from an all male prison. My house is built on my family home is built on fill-in. So not even the actual ground, because that's where my community was decided to be put. The same ground where they put the prisoners. And so in the same ground that's the same ground that they saw that had no value. That's why they put Black lives on that ground, because they believe that those lives didn't have no value. And that's the same reason why they put those incarcerated citizens in that same location because they believe that just like the land, just like the people, just like those inmates, they have no value. So when big businesses and capitalists sell us out, people like Joe Manchin, when they sell us out, at the end of the day, since we know that justice doesn't start at the bottom, it starts at the top, it starts at the very bottom, and the people at the very bottom have to receive freedom, justice, and equity for all of us to redeem our freedom and justice, equity together. When those floods happen, when the hurricanes come, when it starts to burn, Black and brown people suffer the most. My community in 3 hours was swept away by storm surge with one river. Do you guys all remember and recall the hurricanes and the tropical storms that happened around August, September last year? And they hit in New York and they hit in all these big cities. Question yourself, I'm from Wilmington, Delaware. Where's Joe Biden from? Joe Biden knows nothing about community. And that's why he left his community high and dry. My neighborhood was displaced by one river in 3 hours, 200 families. So to say that when you think that about the climate crisis and you think about the hurricanes, the tropical storms and everything that's affecting us because of racism, because of white supremacy, because of capitalism that beats on the back of Black and brown people, we get the bulk of all of it because we are reaping the benefit of being the most neglected. And I say that because I premise that to use COVID. When we think about when the whole COVID crisis, Black and brown people suffered the most because they were already the most marginalized people in America. So my point to execute this is that what we're talking about now, what we're doing, you guys, is strategically important. It is so important for us to pay the price for freedom, like it's been paid for us so many times before. Definitely when it's because it's been paid by people that look like me. Everybody in this room, everybody on this call gets to reap the benefits of living very more comfortably than you would have lived 70 years ago. That's because Black bodies put their lives on the line. All of us get to go to the schools of our choices. We get to go vote, even though 48 out of 50 states have voting rights suppression. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to go sit in the back of the bus. You can love who you want to. Because Black bodies put their backs on the line performatively and was given nothing in return. So look at all of those individual freedoms that we all garnered during the 1960s and 70s, and look at the state of Black people now. We have not redeemed any of those things that the federal government keeps making loopholes for, like voting, like the climate crisis, like women's ovaries. So I premise to say all these things, guys, I need us to understand that we need to be very motherfucking controversial about our freedom. This isn't a sport. People are dying. Black bodies are dying. And if we don't get it together, we will all burn, drown, and suffocate together. We have to be willing to risk it all. We have to be willing to do what is necessary. Because I'm telling you, there's other people who are in other chat rooms and other calls having conversations like we are. And you know what they're doing? They're shutting down the highway with big ass trucks. When COVID happened, these same people showed up to their state buildings with guns, because they wanted haircuts and to get their nails done. And in their brain, showing up with guns to the state building was necessary to them. Are you guys following what I'm saying? So how much is the climate crisis? How much is women's ovaries? How much are Black lives and Native lives, gun control? How much are these things really worth to us? Because if we value them so much, put a price on it. Put a price on it. What is the price you are willing to pay for freedom, justice, and equity, and not just for yourself, but for every person to redeem freedom, justice, and equity? What are you willing to pay? We're going to have to come up off of something. I know Starbucks and Amazon and Chick-fil-A and everything else keeps us very maintained in our capitalistic society, but we have to be willing to emancipate our brains and think differently and question everything. Everything. The police need to be abolished. Why? Because the money that should be going towards reforming our climate and solving the climate crisis and solving those issues, the money is going to the wrong places. And we are getting left out of the conversation. So I say these things and I premise all these things to be a big ass thorn in all of our asses, to get the fuck up. Because if not, we are going to perish. But I believe in you. I believe in every single last person on this call that we have what it takes to build people power. So it only takes 3.5% to push the needle. Everything we've ever garnered, from civil rights to slavery, it took 3.5% of the population to push the needle. The French Revolution, 3.5%. And I believe we have it if we're willing to love each other radically, if we're willing to see the intersectionality within our movement spaces, if we're willing to love radically and acknowledge each other and accept the fact that our fights are each other's fights, that they are not mutually exclusive. They are the same wave being fed by the same 1% of people who are dicking us all over as they take our money. We have to be willing to see the vision of equality, equity, and justice, step outside ourselves and see the world how other people see them so that we show up for them. There is no climate justice. There is no climate justice if Indigenous people don't get liberation, because we're on their land. And that's across the board in different countries. There is no fixing the climate crisis if it's not written in a lens that comes from a way of equity and justice, because we already know that Black and brown people are going to be predisposed to be getting treated the worst when everything goes to hell. So I say these things because at the end of the day, it takes people power. And we don't have to wait for the neoliberals and the simple-minded Democrats and everybody under the sun to care about these things. We already care enough. And there's other people all across this country who are thinking the exact same way we do. We need to tell them to pull up. We need to invite them. We need to bring them to the table so that we can create our own solutions and tear this country down and rebuild it in our own image. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing violent about saying, tear this bitch down. Why? Because Black and brown people built it. And if we built it before collectively as a unit, without race, gender, sexuality, nationality, we can rebuild it together in a better way. We have every right to reimagine what our lives look like. It's not okay to know that shootings in this country are at the all-time high. It's not okay to know that Black bodies get murdered like crazy. It's not okay to know that we have less than 25 years before things get really bad. Every 3 seconds, a child under 5 dies. There's 16,000 kids a day that die from not having access to fresh water. That's just a day. That's not even kids. That's not even kids above 4, 5, and 6. That's just under 5. So I just want to say this, guys. I want to conclude, but at the end of the day, there is a level of urgency that we need to be moving with into regards. There's no more time for speeches and lectures. Like, it's not when Roe versus Wade it's not if Roe versus Wade gets overturned. It's when it happens. And so when it happens, what are we willing to do? It's not when the climate crisis affects us all. It's coming by disaster or design. So what are we going to do? Because they are not going to do anything about it because they do not care about our lives. They don't forget all that red and blue crap. They don't care about none of that shit. All they see is red. All they see is green and white. It's up to us. So I know I sound like a lot, and I know I'm preaching, and I know that I can be very assertive, but that's because it's that urgent, y'all. It's that urgent. Like, failure is not an option. Failing is not an option. So you're gonna have to come up with some time. You're gonna have to come up with some resources. You're gonna have to come up with some money. You're gonna have to lose some friendships. You may have to lose your job. You may have to confront your friends. You may have to lose your loved one. Why? Because liberation is that important. Solving the climate crisis is that important. So what are you willing to pay for? So my name is Kevin Kramer, and I just want us to really think about what are we willing to pay for the price of freedom? The climate crisis is urgent, that we must center the climate crisis in racial and economic justice. I am the co-founder and director of the Palm Collective coalition group, building to a transformative era through the lens of abolition and community power and love and mutual aid. in the District of Columbia, and I believe in us, but we have to lip service and cute actions and butterflies is not gonna save us, y'all. We keep us safe. They don't care about us. So if you love me as much as I love y'all, we have to do this together. Ashe.
Thank you, Kevin.
Tracy.
Okay.
Oh, and you can please, like, first thing, and you can please, my GoFundMe link is in there. When I say I'm a full-time revolutionary, I don't want people to think that your boy's didn't try the capitalist life and didn't become a bomb-ass successful Black person. I literally did. I got 2 degrees, a bachelor's of science in politics and in sociology. I left a job of $95,000 a year. I had a 401k. I had 25 days of PTO, 2 volunteer days, and 5 sick days. And I gave it all up to go fight for our liberation because that's how much it means to me. So I love y'all from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Kevin. Now it is my pleasure to welcome our next speaker, Callie Justice from Declare Emergency. So Callie's life as an activist began with the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. She has worked with others to try to change the world for the better in many ways since then. Most recently, Callie co-founded Declare Emergency's sister group, Quit Carbon NC, and she is a member of Declare Emergency's core team and serves as the Declare Emergency Action Working Group. So welcome, Callie.
Thanks, Gracie. Thanks to everybody who's hanging in there. How many do we, we still have as many as we had when we started, really? That's great. That's really great. So my assignment here is I'm a member of the core team with Declare Emergency and also the Declare Emergency Action Group. And my assignment is to get you all clearly informed about what is here, the work available and needed for you to do, and the difference it's going to make. Heard a lot of very powerful, inspirational talk and sharing. And I'm guessing everybody's, like me, been going through kind of a roller coaster of feelings. And maybe we can take a little pause before we get down to business and just, everybody take a few nice deep breaths. Okay. We're here, we're grounded, feet are on the ground, we're together. We're together. How good that is. Yeah. I think the personal thing I want to say is I've been worried about the climate since the early 70s, worried about the environment in general. And it seemed very clear that the priorities of the way society has been organized were going to send us to a very bad place. I thought in a long, long time, but it turns out it was faster. And really Extinction Rebellion in the early days and more recently, the strategy that is supporting the work of all the groups in the A22 network. It's the first time I felt like there was something I could do that had a chance of making the difference, right? Because that's the missing piece. We can know how bad it is. We can want to be good and do good, but we have to have a sense that there's something we could do that would matter. And so for me, it's this strategy. And so one piece of information I wanted to be sure you all have is that there's a talk on YouTube that Roger gave back in the fall called How to Stop the Climate Crisis in 6 Months. Maybe we could have that in the chat. It gives a deep, detailed description of the strategy that has a chance Roger said at the time, 25 to 50%. I hope it's still that good of working, because that's better than zero, which is what we've seen, from all the other efforts so far. So for me, like 25 to 50, all right, I am going for it. Let's run this experiment and see what we can do. So that's what we're up to. The strategy is primarily nonviolence, has to be a big part of it, but also along with nonviolence, actions that demonstrate a willingness to sacrifice. So like the freedom riders were mentioned earlier, that's a wonderful example of how that, and really the whole early civil rights movement's full of those examples of the ways that people being visibly putting their bodies on the line with nonviolence, coming from a place of love, which was very clear in the early civil rights movement. I hope it will be with us too. And causing major disruption, right? Again and again and again, not as an event to be spectated, but as a way of life that goes on long enough that our demands have to be addressed and have to be hopefully eventually met. So for me, it's really all about strategy, and that's where all my devotion and dedication, comes after the seeing how bad it is part of things. And I hope that you all will see that too. It's can be hard for people to get this strategy. It's not just about let's go get arrested, right? Because getting arrested once or twice, that's just another spectacle, right? The system can easily incorporate that into its maw. But as you heard from the Save Old Growth people, that two times a week was their beginning place. They got up to 3, and so that's our ambition. We want to be causing disruptive, sacrificial, nonviolent actions in the Capitol. And I'm good with other places too. I understand the focus on the Capitol, and if it's an either-or thing, yes, come to DC. But we saw with Black Lives Matter erupting all over the country had a very big impact too. So, but yes, let's all go to Washington in July. That's the next step right now. Having worked with starting Quit Carbon NC, starting last fall, and then we're folding in with Declare Emergency now, and I'm getting to be, do a lot of work. What's gotten real clear to me is that it may be just as hard to get people to hand out leaflets as it is to get people to come sit down in the road. I have to tell you, it's not glamorous, it's not sexy, it's not bold and brave to hand out leaflets. But if it doesn't happen, then we never get to the people sitting in the road, because we don't find the people who are at a point where they're going to come and do what needs to be done. So if you're thinking about, well, yeah, I'd like to do something, but I'm not really at the sit in the road place, that's not an excuse. That's not a backdoor out here. If you've followed us this far, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Some of it is that anybody can step right in and do it kind of work. Some of it, we need like middle management, project manager kind of people very badly to organize. Like when people start coming in greater numbers, if we don't have our organization in place, we're not going to be able to use them well. So if you're somebody who feels like the idea of breaking the law is just a bit too much right now, and you have other skills, please come to the Wednesday night meeting. or next Sunday's meeting, a meeting, or, send in the action form and write something under other if none of the boxes seem like you. That'd be great. The other thing I want to mention, just trying to leave really clear tracks for how to participate. When you fill out the Action Network form, there'll be a place to commit to coming to DC in July, and you can do that. Also, for people coming from out of town, since I'm in North Carolina, I'm pretty aware of some of those needs. And so we've decided to provide a contact person for people who are going to be coming to DC from out of town, whether you're coming to do an arrestable action or whether you're coming to provide, limousine services for people who need to be picked up from jail and, driven back to wherever they're staying, or whatever reason you're coming. We have a contact place for you to find out about housing assistance and find out about transportation to DC. So really great hearing from Adam earlier. It sounds like we're going to have plenty of money to do all that, which is wonderful. And I hope there are others here who are in a position to make some significant donations, because this, if we get the numbers we need, people are going to need food, people are going to need shelter, people are going to need the occasional Uber ride here or there, or parking fees. There's just going to be a lot to cover. So whatever amount you can donate, that's also something you can do on the Declare Emergency website. So the contact information, if you want to talk about getting assistance for housing or for transportation, is I think it'll be in the chat at some point, but it's quitcarbonnc@gmail.com, and it'll come to me, and so you know who it's coming to. Not a mystery person, and it'll be great to work with you to sort out what it's going to take to get you there. The other thing I just want to add is there are a lot of hard things about doing this work. The hardest is by far not sitting in the road and getting arrested. At least it hasn't been for me so far. Just a couple of times, so I haven't had any long stays, but that's pretty smooth. It's the hardest is knowing what you know, right? And knowing it all the time. When you're doing this work all the time, the reality is with you all the time. And that's hard. I think I would have an easier time checking out and kind of, getting some denial space if I weren't doing the work. But balancing that out is the other people you get to do the work with. And these friendships are so meaningful and so really precious. And you have to earn them, right? They come because of what Roger was saying, because of what we feel like we must do. You get to meet other people that share that. So I look forward to getting to know all of you better over time as we work together to do everything we can to save humanity and lots of the rest of nature. Thanks.
Thank you, Callie. And we're going to have a short Q&A session with Adam, and let's limit it to 3 questions, please. So if you have any questions, could you please enter it into the chat?
That's okay. No one has any. Those were inspiring talks. I feel filled up.
Okay, we have one question from Jaren. So why did you choose an asteroid for the plot specifically? Were there any others you considered?
Yeah, so the whole idea of the movie was that, you know, to use the terms of Timothy Morton, we're really dealing with two hyperobjects right now. We're dealing with the hyperobject of the climate being flooded with CO2 and the feedback loops being so beyond any kind of science we have, closer to, you know, the stock market, weather, systems of chaos. And then the second hyperobject we're dealing with is humanity's reaction to any kind of macro confusing event. So when we made Don't Look Up, the idea was, let's eliminate one hyperobject, which is the climate crisis, and let's focus on mankind's response to a crisis. And if you really look at it, as we now know, we were warned. I think the first formula on global warming was done in the 1890s. And we now know that there were memos put on the desk of Richard Nixon saying Washington, D.C. is going to be underwater if we don't do anything. And I'm sure a lot of you have listened to Amy Westervelt's amazing podcast, Drilled, about how the oil companies were warned in the 70s that this was going to happen. And unfortunately, when our country swung towards deregulation and big money, the oil companies decided it was cheaper to ride out the apocalypse. So with Don't Look Up, we wanted to emphasize we could stop this. It's really simple. But we wanted to show how our media, our leaders, our celebrity culture, our, you know, cliques, our sort of slot machine culture makes a very simple survival decision incredibly complicated and ultimately fatal.
Okay, thank you. And there's a few questions about celebrities. So one question is, considering the power of influence celebrities have, how do we get more folks in the entertainment industry to become more outspoken regarding the climate emergency?
Yeah, it's very tricky because celebrity crosses a couple of different lines. You know, as I'm sure you all know, we're in a class inequality crisis. I mean, part of what's driving the climate crisis and our inaction is the fact that big money has captured our culture, our government, our press, on and on. And so I've noticed, because for years I've been working on stuff like this, getting actor friends of mine, making videos, there's a backlash to it, which is, shut up, you rich Hollywood guy. Now, I think the really effective way to do it is to incorporate it in your day-to-day speech. There's a guy who hosts a, believe it or not, a sports comedy show in the US. I think it's the #1 sports show in the US. And his name is Dan Le Batard. And it's a podcast, actually. It's not a radio show, but it's immensely popular. And Dan is an incredible guy. He left ESPN because they wouldn't let him talk about racism, the climate crisis, all, you know, the rise of fascism. So he just went off on his own. But the way Dan talks about climate is he brings it up like a sane human being. He'll just be talking about something and he'll say, of course, the livable climate is collapsing, so we have to keep that in mind. He doesn't even create segments for it. He just incorporates it into his reality. So I would love to see comedians, musicians, all of the people that have a spotlight, just take the reality in. I think that's all you have to do. The whole idea that like videos or, you know, sort of big spotlight moments will change things. I don't think that's true. I think the real way that you can change things, if you're an incredibly famous person, is to just acknowledge the reality. And if we were all drowning right now, if we all had water up to here, we would talk about the fact that water is up to here. We wouldn't ignore it and talk about our new album or our comedy special or do jokes. So, you know, everyone out there who has a spotlight, I would just say, let the reality hit your bones.
Do you think it would be strategic to try to get celebrities to be arrested for this cause?
Yeah, I do. I think there is a line that celebrities can cross. And I think when you're getting arrested, that's no joke. I would love to see, I've committed to getting arrested. We're obviously coming out of COVID. I'm a writer, director. I'm not a giant celebrity, but I'm going to get arrested. And I think the idea of big celebrities getting arrested, I think that means something. I think there'll be people that will roll their eyes. But I do think it's important to see people that are famous or wealthy or they're in the spotlight, not only getting arrested, but picking people up from jail who've just been bailed out, bailing those people out, letting activists stay at their house, handing food out. I mean, back in the 90s, it's sad, the last gasps of the old labor movement. Fortunately, there's a new labor movement coming up. My friends and I at SNL, when there were strikes, we would go hand out soup and coffee to the strikers. And they were like, no one knew who we were then, but they were like, oh, the SNL writers. I actually think the more human and the more feet on the ground, the sacrifice, the more powerful. I think when celebrities use a celebrity platform to put out their beliefs, it turns people off. But to show that this celebrity stuff is BS, all it is cameras and lighting and class inequality and illusion. I think when celebrities break that wall, it does have power.
Thank you, Adam. And there are definitely various ways that people can get involved in this movement. And that's what we're going to talk about in our breakout rooms right now. So what we're going to talk about is how do you think you could contribute to our upcoming DC action in July? So there's various rules, like our top priority are arrestables, but there's also, we need people working on mobilization. So that's like outreach, emailing, phone calls, canvassing. We also need action support people. And as somebody who's about to do an action tomorrow, I love those people. And you can also donate to our calls.